There we go. So we are recording. So again, thank you very much and welcome. The program tonight is that we have two guests speakers, and am I getting echoey? Is it echoey there? Not quite sure why it's doing that. If everyone else could maybe be on mute. If you're not on mute, that would really assist. And then, of course, when you want to ask a question, then certainly can do so, and that might just help. So yes, I'm just going to introduce our two speakers. So firstly, we have Tricia Malowney, and Tricia's very well known to OC Connections. And Tricia is also a board member of Scope Australia and a member of the Fire Rescue Victoria Strategic Advisory Council. She's also a chair of the Client Advisory Committee at OCC. And in 2013, Tricia was inducted into the Victorian Honour Roll of Women for Services to Women with Disabilities. In 2017, Tricia was awarded an Order of the Australia Medal, which is fabulous, for her advocacy work on behalf of people with disabilities. Tricia is a vaccine champion with the Victorian Department of Health, and that's one of the reasons that Tricia's here tonight, but it's also because she does have that connection with our participant reference group at OCC and also has some lived experience. So we really value the contribution from Tricia this evening. And I will just also introduce our second speaker, and we have Sarah, who we've been chatting with. Sarah Anderson is a senior advisor with the Department of Health. She has qualifications in dental surgery and also art history with honours. She has a range of roles in the Victorian, or has had a range of roles in the Victorian government, and has been in the COVID-19 response group since the beginning of the pandemic. So you can imagine that Sarah's been just a little bit busy over that time. So welcome to both Tricia and Sarah, and as I mentioned, we're very, very excited to have you on board this evening to help facilitate this and to assist with some information that's really, really vital. So what we're going to do is just work through the presentation. Can I just check that everyone can see the presentation? Excellent, that's a good start. So we're just going to start with Tricia, if you would like to kick it off. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks everyone. I think it's important to understand why I'm a vaccine champion. So I contracted polio in 1954 at the age of 4 months, and I got polio because there wasn't a vaccine available. And we know that polio was eliminated once everybody in Australia got vaccinated. That took some time. It's one of the few that people aren't so resistant to, which is really good. But I know that being vaccinated against COVID for me is essential. I have a disability. I have chronic lung disease as a result of having had polio. I've got a very weak immune system. So I didn't go into it lightly when I had my vaccine. I went and spoke to my family doctor and my lung specialist, who was actually working on COVID wards. And so he was quite keen that I should get vaccinated as well. But he was able to give me the facts rather than listening to somebody else trying to tell me facts. So my medical practitioner and my lung specialist are both highly qualified and have spent many years learning about these things. So I rely on them heavily. The other reason that I'm really keen to see vaccination rates rise is that I work internationally. And I have friends in India who have had friends die, and they are people with disabilities. So for me, it's really important that we get them vaccinated. I also have parents who are 91 and 95. They've both been double vaccinated. We call my dad Lazarus because we keep thinking we're losing him, and then all of a sudden he's back walking around the block again. He had a heart attack last week, but he's home and walking around the block again. Oh, yeah. So, but it is important that they don't unnecessarily catch something. So for me, it's about looking after me. My husband's 80 and has cancer, so I need to look after him, and I need to look after my parents, and I need to make sure my colleagues with disabilities are well looked after too. And in chairing the client reference group, they said to me, what do we do? We're a bit scared because some of the people we work with haven't been vaccinated and they don't want to get vaccinated, which is why we bought the champions in to talk to them about what's best to do. So that's my story. But now I'll talk to you about the COVIDSafe community messaging. And I'm sure you've seen this. This is not new. So get vaccinated. I can't say that enough. Get vaccinated. I've done a video on getting vaccinated, which I'm quite happy to share. It's a scope video, but it's public. Wear a mask when required and wash your hands to reduce the spread of COVID-19. Scan QR codes so we can find people exposed to COVID-19 quickly. If you don't have a phone, you can sign on. Every store now has a sign-on message. Get tested if you have COVID-19 symptoms so that we can find COVID-19 quickly. So you might just think you've got a cold, but you don't necessarily. One of my friends is COVID positive at the moment. She's been double vaccinated and it presented as a cold, but she's now given it to her 4-year-old twin granddaughters. Or it might have been the other way around, we're not sure. But their mum is due to give birth in the next 2 weeks. And so she's had to isolate separately from the 2 little girls who are with their dad, who's a doctor, right? So he's had to leave work. So that's another doctor we've had to bring offline. And he can't go back to work until they've recovered, until we've gone through the whole isolation period. So isolating at home if you had COVID-19 or a close contact. So Noel's having surgery today and he had his COVID test on Friday. So we've been isolating at home since Friday, and it's just as well we're very good friends because you can't get away from each other when you're isolating at home, but it's good, we're good. COVID-19 vaccination and testing are free for everyone. You do not need insurance or a visa or a Medicare card to get it. And there's a very good reason for that, because we don't want to have the spread of the disease. So if everybody gets vaccinated, it's better for all of us. It shouldn't make a difference whether you've got a Medicare card or you're just here as a visitor. We want everybody to get vaccinated. It's in Australia's interest to do that. Thanks. So the first sign of any of these symptoms, get tested, then stay home. Fever, runny nose. I feel like sometimes I've got a perpetual runny nose, but this is the healthiest I've ever been, let me tell you. I haven't been anywhere to get anything. Sore throat, a cough, chills, shortness of breath, loss of sense or of smell or taste. And some people have thought, oh, I didn't think that would mean anything. It's just, you know, I'm just a bit off. Get tested. It's better for everybody if you get tested. We know it's a nuisance, but you get used to it. And now everyone aged 12 years and over is eligible. So if you notice that the statistics that are being given out now are on people who are 12 years and over. And can I tell you that those above, I think it's above 80, are winning the vaccination statistics rate. So where do we get vaccinated? So you've got hospital hubs. So when I dropped Noel at the hospital today, there was a schoolgirl came in and she said, I'm here for vaccination. So they were able to point her where to go. COVID vaccine clinics, high volume vaccination centres. So the hospitals, like, so if you look at Western Health, they have huge areas that are set aside. The Sunshine car park at the hospital is set aside as a COVID vaccine clinic, high volume. GPs, GP respiratory clinics, Aboriginal community controlled health organisations, pharmacies. You've probably noticed that there are a lot more pharmacies doing it. My local one has set up a separate area for vaccination. Mobile COVID vaccine teams, so that they can go to places rather than have people come to them. Community health vaccine network. So there's a whole range of options available to people. So you should be able to find a place to go fairly easily. I got mine done at my GP, and I got it done there was because I wanted to be filmed. And so I was able to arrange that and get permission from them to be filmed there. Thanks. It's stuck. Here we go. And if you have a look at that, look how many places there are that you can get vaccinated. You know, we're fairly lucky that we've got this huge network of places that can do it, and that there's a range of places where I had the AstraZeneca jab, and I had that fairly early. The first jab I had, I was a bit tired. The second jab, I was fine. I did have a sore arm, but it was fine. You know, it wasn't any different for me. I get the same sort of reaction when I have a flu vaccine, so it wasn't too bad. You can see there's Pfizer, there's some that are AZ only, and I can't tell which ones are which because it's a very busy slide, but that's okay. So and they've got Moderna, and there's a whole lot of things, pop-up clinics. As you can see, there's a whole lot of different ways of doing it too. So there you go. So to help people who are at high risk of contracting or getting very sick from COVID get vaccinated, appointments are being reserved at vaccination centres. So that means that we can make sure that they get priority places in that. If you are vulnerable to transition of COVID-19 or developing serious disease, you can currently access a reserved appointment. And to book a reserved appointment, call the coronavirus hotline on 1-800-675-398. And there's a link there for further information. So if someone is unable to get vaccinated via their usual support networks, disability liaison officers can assist them to make suitable arrangements. And to contact a DLO, there's an easy online form. And if you can't use the form, you can email the DLO coordinator at dhhs.vic.gov.au. So as you can see, they're really trying to make sure. I mean, it took a long time, I think, for the disability community to get going, as we all know. But I think we're moving quite well now, and it really is, to my mind, it's a group of people who really need to be supported, and we know from our own community at OC Connections that one of the things they all say to me all the time is, I miss my friends, I miss seeing people. When they see Therese in the room, they go, oh, Therese, we haven't seen you for such a long time. Because they really like seeing you, because they know they're welcome, and they know that they're in a place where they can make that really solid connection. So that's why it's so important to me. So how to book if I don't have a Medicare card? If you aren't eligible for Medicare, you can register for an individual healthcare identifier, but it's preferred but not mandatory, and it allows you to have proof of your COVID-19 vaccination. And I think that's going to be the really good outcome of this, is that we're going to have that passport. You can be vaccinated without an IHI or a Medicare card, provided you meet the current eligibility criteria. And at the moment, that's over 12. So you're pretty right. But you have to take any form of identification available with you to your appointment. You'll be able to receive the vaccine from a state I'll say that again, a state vaccination clinic, not a GP clinic. So if you do know somebody in that situation, you can let them know that there are options. I'll pass over to Sarah now.
Thank you, Tricia. That was great. Thank you for providing the rundown on the program. So just a bit about my background. I have come into the program as a former dental surgeon and also with humanities qualifications. So I now work in public health administration. But because of my training as a dental surgeon, I was extremely keen to be part of the COVID-19 response, because there are significant overlaps in training between medical professionals and dental professionals. And we do have good knowledge through our training of vaccines and the importance of public health measures. So I'm very grateful to be part of the COVID-19 response. If we could move on to the next slide, that'd be great. Thank you. So just to let you know about the 3 vaccines that are available at the moment in Australia. I'm sure this is information that you all know about. We have AstraZeneca, which is a traditional type of vaccine. It's a viral vector vaccine. At this moment in time, this vaccine is targeted to those who are older predominantly on the basis of the TTS syndrome, which I'll talk a bit more about shortly. But it can also be accessed by those who are ages 18 to 59. And that's particularly important in an outbreak setting because the risks to you of coronavirus far outweigh the risks associated with any of the vaccines. So if you're in an outbreak setting, the best vaccine that you can get is the one that's available. At the moment, the recommendations for dosage spacing are 4 to 12 weeks. Particularly in an outbreak, we would encourage people to access any vaccine that they can, and we would encourage the shorter dosage spacing of 4 weeks, and that's in line with the ATAGI recommendations. Probably the main vaccine you've heard a lot about is the Pfizer vaccine. That is an mRNA vaccine, and I'll talk a little bit about that shortly and what that means. Vaccine spacing for Pfizer is 3 to 6 weeks. We've just recently switched back to 3 weeks. The aim here is we were trying to get the largest percentage of the population vaccinated in the shortest possible time. This is a vaccine that is available through our state vaccination centres, but also through other places where you can access your vaccine, and that includes GPs and some of the other community health services and the Aboriginal community health services also. And then the final vaccine that's been more recently made available in Australia is Moderna. It's approved for the same age group that Pfizer is, which is those 12 and above. Very similar vaccine in terms of its design, which is the messenger mRNA type of vaccine. And again, I'll go into that in just a minute. 2 doses again, so they're all 2 doses, 4 to 6 weeks apart. We're encouraging 4 weeks apart and predominantly available through pharmacies, but also state vaccination centres. Next slide, please. Okay, so this just breaks down some of the information a bit more that I've just touched upon. Again, just confirming that AstraZeneca, mostly targeting those who are 60 and above, but also if you're in outbreak setting, we do encourage you, if Pfizer's not available, which is the recommended vaccine for those 12 to 59, or Moderna, if those two are not available, AstraZeneca is, then we encourage people to access vaccination with AstraZeneca. Also, just to confirm that for people who have certain medical conditions, and the link is in this presentation which will be distributed, if they're over 60 and also if they're in certain workforces, then they can access Pfizer vaccine as well through the state vaccination centres. Next slide, please. Okay, this is considered a very important announcement that was made just last week, I think, and then came into force from Friday, that persons over 60 now can be offered mRNA vaccines. And we're starting out with just GPs and pharmacies, which is the Commonwealth administered branch of the program, but the Victorian program will catch up with that soon. And so that persons who are 60 and above can access Pfizer and Moderna once we get online with the Commonwealth program there. Thank you. Next slide, please. All right, so Moderna, we just want to touch on this because it is a newer vaccine to Australia. This link again, this is one to know about. So predominantly Moderna, and you might have also heard of it called Spikevax. You can access it through pharmacies, and there is a whole network of pharmacies throughout Australia where Moderna is being offered. Again, this is a really good way to access the vaccine because it's convenient, and it's, I think, would be very easy to get in and get an appointment. So please consider that as an option. And we provided some statistics here. So one of the major risks with COVID-19 is if you're unvaccinated and you catch it, you're very likely, from a statistical point of view, to wind up requiring hospitalisation and from there potentially ventilation, and you may pass away very sadly from COVID-19. However, we've got some statistics here that if you've been vaccinated with Moderna, the degree of protection that you get from the vaccine in a real life situation is 75 to 85%. In terms of protection against severe disease leading to hospitalisation, the need to be on a ventilator or possibly dying is 80 to 100%. So they're very impressive figures from a statistical point of view. So again, Moderna is a very effective vaccine. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to recap here, the recommended dosage intervals, it's very important that people follow up to get their second dose. So even though there's a very high degree of efficacy in terms of your protection with dose 1, that level of protection is increased with dose 2. So just to clarify the dosage intervals, for Pfizer, we're encouraging 3 weeks, but with a recommended range of 3 to 6. Moderna 4, but again, a recommended range of 4 to 6. And AstraZeneca 6 weeks. And it will vary slightly depending on whether we're in an outbreak. And the acceptable range there, according to ATAGI, is 4 to 12 weeks. Thank you. Next slide, please. All right, so we do get a lot of questions about booster shots. ATAGI have come out and provided a very convenient statement in this area to say that at this stage, the Therapeutic Goods Administration have yet to receive an application within Australia to look at boosters for the general population. What is being considered at this time is the possibility of boosters for those who are in vulnerable populations. So I know what is definitely being considered, so maybe people who are immunocompromised, such as diabetics and so on. That is the possibility that we're considering at this point in time in Australia. Certainly there are discussions in this area, but the official position at this time is that there are no immediate plans to move forward with boosters. Thank you. Next slide. All right, and again, we are commonly asked about how the vaccines were developed and whether certain phases in development were skipped or whether they were rushed through, and the answer to that is absolutely not. So certainly, traditionally, vaccines are developed over quite a lengthy period of time, but it's very important to bear in mind that the situation we've been in with the global pandemic is essentially unprecedented, not in our living memory anyway. So for that reason, the scientific community around the world needed to come together very quickly and cover off on all the normal stages of vaccine development, but in a shorter period of time. And this was achieved by the different stages of testing and checking for safety and so on being run through potentially simultaneously. So you can see here from that slide that some of the testing for efficacy was going on at the same stage as production and so on. So this meant that we could achieve the same kind of outcome in a global pandemic than would perhaps be looked at over a 10 to 15 year period. And the other thing that's really important to bear in mind, and I think this is a really good point, is that a lot of the technology for vaccines was already available. We already had that knowledge, we already had that technical capability, so it was just a matter of applying that and then moving through the same steps in a quicker pace and running through some of the stages simultaneously so that we could get a solution to the world in a reasonable time frame to save as many lives possible. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm actually not super keen on this slide because I think the next one is actually better, so we might just skip to the next one if you don't mind. Okay, I think this is a better diagram here. So this one breaks down the different types of vaccines and how they work. So there are two basic types. One is the messenger RNA type, and then the other is the viral vector type, which is the AstraZeneca vaccine. So Pfizer and Moderna are both very similar. They contain a little bit of messenger mRNA, so it's a portion of the vaccine, portion of the virus, and what it does, it teaches your body how to produce the spike protein. So messenger RNA is messenger RNA, it's not DNA, and that's probably one of the most important points to understand in this area. Commonly people think that the RNA is a reference to something similar to DNA, and that therefore the vaccines have the possibility of changing you as a person. They don't. That is DNA, and it resides in the nucleus of the cell. So messenger RNA gives instructions to the machinery of the cells in your body so that they can produce spike proteins, and that your body will then learn the immune response required so that it can mount a defense if you are in a real life situation down the track after being vaccinated, and that your body can respond as though it has previously encountered the virus. And with the viral vector vaccines, that's a different approach. It uses a killed virus, but one that would affect chimpanzees with a common cold, and that's been adapted. So again, both of these approaches work to teach your body how to mount an immune response ahead of time. And in each case, the portion of the virus that's used is a killed virus. It's not the whole virus. It cannot give you coronavirus. So there's no risk of you catching coronavirus from being vaccinated. Thank you. Next slide, please. So these slides just break down a little bit more about how mRNA vaccines work. So it explains here, you can just get a bit more detail. Messenger RNA is, and it tells your body how to make proteins. And then they've given you a diagram here. It's enclosed, the messenger RNA is enclosed inside like a bubble, and that's how it's introduced into your body. And then it teaches your body how to make the spike protein so that you later down the track, your body knows, aha, that's what that is. That's coronavirus. I've seen it before. I know what to do, so that your body can fight it off in a real life situation. Thank you. Next slide, please. And this is just a little bit more about the AstraZeneca vaccine using the vector. And when they say vector, what that means is they've taken a similar kind of virus, which is a chimpanzee common cold virus, and they have adapted that so that they can introduce that same information into your body and teach your body ahead of time by giving instructions to your immune system so that it knows how to respond in the future. Thank you. Next slide, please. All right, so this looks like a slide with quite a lot of information. Basically what it means is viruses are always changing, and which is I guess it's a natural consequence of the fact that they are living organisms. The thing that makes this difficult for us is that when vaccines are developed, they were developed to cover the information we had about coronavirus at the time. Now, obviously, the Delta, you will have all heard a lot about Delta, and that has become a particularly concerning variant. So I think as vaccines continue to be administered and across the population, we will grow in our understanding at the same time of the virus variants that are circulating, and potentially with booster shots, if they're administered more broadly or if they're required, then we will adapt and respond and be able to respond to the changing nature of the virus, if that makes sense. Next slide, please. Okay, so Delta, a bit more about Delta. This is one of the variants that we have to be a bit more worried about. With this particular variant of coronavirus, it has a higher risk of hospitalization, mostly because it's a particularly contagious virus. We found that a lot more children and younger persons have been affected by it, but we do want to emphasize that when people are vaccinated, particularly if they've received both doses of AstraZeneca, Pfizer or Moderna, then they are protected against the Delta variant to a very large extent, against severe disease and hospitalization. So even though we are more concerned about Delta than some of the other variants and the original wild type of the virus, if you're vaccinated and double vaccinated with AstraZeneca, Pfizer or Moderna, now that it's available, then you are to a very, very, very large extent protected against the risk of needing to go to hospital, be placed on a ventilator, or potentially die from coronavirus. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay. We just want to confirm that the way in which AstraZeneca is being administered in the Victorian program is on par with the ATAGI recommendations, and that's the main body in Australia. It's an independent body that provides recommendations around vaccines. TTS is the syndrome that you might have heard quite a bit about. It's the clotting syndrome, which is an immune system mediated clot. It seems to be much higher risk in those who are younger, because of the more active immune systems of younger persons. It occurs far less regularly in those who are older, and it's still extremely rare. So in Australia, we've had many, many millions of doses of AstraZeneca administered. I think it's 7 million doses across the population was a recent figure, and we've had 7 deaths, which in terms of medical interventions is a very high level of safety and efficacy. So ATAGI recommendations are that it's the preferred vaccine for those over 60, and that's the recommendation we're keeping within the Victorian program. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, all right, but it is important that you know about the TTS syndrome. It is a different type of clot to the clots that can accompany some other medications, such as the oral contraceptive pill. or stroke. It's different to that type of clot, or deep vein thrombosis. That's the sort of clots you might have heard about before. And it commonly occurs 4 to 20 days after a person's been vaccinated. And it's important to be aware of the symptoms that accompany it. In particular, often a severe headache. And it depends partly on the location of the clot, whether it's in the brain or if it's in the abdominal region. So potentially someone can have neurological symptoms such as blurred vision, slurred speech, feeling drowsy. They might have shortness of breath. Potentially also they might experience chest pain, or depending on the location of the clot, if it's in the abdominal region, then possibly swelling in the leg or so on. And there can be little spots around the injection site. So if they're little blood spots, then that's another key sign. So if someone experiences any of these symptoms, the instruction is that they go to the emergency department. The medical professionals who are involved in the coronavirus response have become much more experienced in responding to TTS. It's very easy to pick up, and there are now very good treatment interventions. The quicker that you get to the hospital, the quicker that you can be treated effectively and have better outcomes as a result. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so then there is also another syndrome that can accompany, in this case, Pfizer or Moderna, which are the mRNA vaccines, and that is myocarditis or pericarditis. So what these two terms mean: myocarditis is inflammation of the heart itself, and pericarditis, inflammation of the sac that surrounds the heart. Now, this is still also a rare syndrome. It is predominantly young males that have been affected, teens, possibly early 20s. The symptoms here are chest pain, a fluttering heart rate, shortness of breath, pain on breathing. In all cases, persons in Australia who've been affected have all had their situation resolved without any further consequence. They have required hospitalisation, but can recover completely. So again, not something to be concerned about, but if someone experiences those symptoms following vaccination with Pfizer or Moderna, the instruction is to go to hospital. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, all right. So this question comes up quite a bit. If somebody has had coronavirus, they will have a degree of natural immunity for a period of time. So it's often asked, if they have had coronavirus, should they go ahead and be vaccinated? And the answer is yes, but after they have completely recovered from the acute illness and they have been cleared from their isolation. So the knowledge is now that once they've recovered, and it shouldn't be after 6 months after they've had it, so just get through that initial period. If someone's had the coronavirus, get through that initial period and then be vaccinated. So that's important to know there. It does not mean that the person has long-term immunity against coronavirus, removing the need for them to be vaccinated. They still need to be vaccinated. So in those cases, definitely go with the doctor's recommendations and please get vaccinated. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, some important points for women here. Right, so COVID-19 vaccines do not have effects on women's fertility. There have been many women who have become pregnant after being vaccinated. It's absolutely the recommendation that during pregnancy, women be offered vaccination with Pfizer at any stage. There have also been studies that show that breastfeeding, some of the antibodies that are generated after COVID-19 vaccination will pass to the baby, which means that the baby has a degree of protection provided the mother is vaccinated against COVID-19. So these are all reasons to go ahead and be vaccinated if a woman is pregnant or planning to be pregnant or breastfeeding. Absolutely not a reason to hold off out of concern around COVID-19 vaccines. That the opposite is the case. Thank you. Next slide, please. And just to reinforce that point, because we're concerned about women who are not being vaccinated when pregnant, if a woman is pregnant and they catch coronavirus, then the risk of going to hospital is far increased compared to a non-pregnant woman. So you can see here 5 times higher chance of needing admission to a hospital, 2 to 3 times higher needed to go to ICU, or 3 times higher of being placed on a ventilator. So very serious risks. And the same is true of the risk to the baby. There are very significant risks of premature birth, and of the baby needing to go to the newborn care unit. So again, all the more reason to get vaccinated if you're pregnant, planning to be pregnant. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, yep, and just to reinforce again, the recommendation from ATAGI is that women be offered Pfizer at any stage of pregnancy. And the encouragement is, if a woman is planning to be pregnant, to not delay getting vaccinated or to wait until a different stage of the pregnancy in order to be vaccinated. The time to do it is now. There's certainly, again, just to reinforce real world evidence, certainly the number of women who've had successful, healthy pregnancies whilst having been vaccinated during the pregnancy, those numbers are huge. So again, there are no concerns in this area. Now, they do accept that the vaccination may be AstraZeneca, but the recommendation is Pfizer. Oh, and another point, they've just reinforcing again that some of the antibodies can pass to the baby through breast milk and also through the placenta, giving the baby a degree of protection. Of course, once the baby is born and we potentially are looking down the track at vaccinating younger children, then that child will still require vaccination in the future. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, and some important points here around vaccines and faith. COVID-19 vaccines are halal. The Australian Fatwa Council has provided a statement on this. Very significant world leaders from a faith perspective have endorsed COVID-19 vaccines. That includes the Pope. And just to confirm that COVID-19 vaccines do not contain human or animal tissue or cells or any material derived from human or animal tissue. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are you to expect if you're vaccinated against COVID-19? And these are the common side effects, and I can tell you what I experienced myself. Injection site pain, I definitely had that. I had a very sore right arm. Fatigue, personally, I was not too bad. I felt a little bit run down after my first Pfizer vaccine for an hour or two. Headache, muscle or body aches, joint aches or pain or chills. I know for myself, I think I felt like a sort of mild cold and flu type symptoms for a couple of hours after my first Pfizer, very sore arm, and then after the second one, just a very sore arm. So this is what you would realistically expect. The other syndromes like TTS, the myocarditis and pericarditis, they are rare. Myocarditis and pericarditis are slightly more common. TTS is extremely rare. Deaths from TTS are 1 in a million, which is very low in comparison to other medical interventions. So again, in terms of balancing your risk against the risk of death due to coronavirus and the level of safety offered by a vaccine, then the evidence comes down very solidly in favour of the vaccine. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, all right, so you are now able to access evidence of your COVID-19 vaccine. Services Australia makes this information available. There are 2 forms that it can take. You can get a digital certificate, which I believe you can have like on your phone, or your immunisation history statement, which also has information about other vaccines that you may have had historically as well. If you want to have a look at this, have a look on Services Australia, and you are able to download your own personal information there. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, all right, so here are the takeaway messages. I believe the dosage administered globally now is higher, but there are very, very significant number of doses of COVID-19 vaccines that have been administered around the world. I believe it's over 6 billion now. Safety is so closely monitored. ATAGI in Australia are extremely rigorous. My understanding is that they are more rigorous than even some of the overseas bodies, which is why there have been some delays in Australia compared to, say, the US, because we're so stringent here. The risks that are there are significant, and they can be significant for individuals, but they are extremely rare. And in comparison to the risk to you as an individual of potentially dying from coronavirus, the risks associated with the vaccines are extremely low, which is why we absolutely encourage you to be vaccinated with Pfizer, AstraZeneca or Moderna. And if you have got questions, the person that you really need to talk to is your GP. because you may have questions that relate to your own personal background, your own medical history. Your GP can answer these. They can talk you through this. There are some specialist immunisation services that you can be referred to if you are eligible, but your GP is the one to talk to about that, and they will be able to assure you of the safety of COVID-19 vaccines. And also, as the pandemic conditions change, recommendations change too. It isn't necessarily that the insights, the earlier insights were wrong. It's just that we may need to shift to a different model, same as we originally had Pfizer at 6 weeks interval, then 3, then 6, and so on. It is because we are adapting and changing as the pandemic conditions change. And this is because we want to reach the largest number of persons in the population and ensure they're protected against coronavirus. And do take care when you're having a look in the media. Try to engage with critical thinking. Some things have been reported in a way that's very biased or actually just completely inaccurate. So take everything with a grain of salt. I have found the information available on the Commonwealth website to be particularly good. I'm from the Victorian Department of Health, but the Commonwealth site has a lot of quite thorough information. You can go into things in a lot more detail there. And potentially, if you even want to look at some of the medical journals, there are some of those articles have been published quite widely as well. I think if you do that, talk to your GP, have a look at the Commonwealth site, have a look at the Victorian Department of Health site, you'll find you'll encounter much more reliable information and be able to combat some of the misinformation that's out there circulating. Thank you. Next slide, please. And thank you. And I think we've got one last slide with all the references on it. So if you'd like to go into some of this information in more detail, then these are the sites to go to. And that's it. And we can take some questions now.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Sarah Anderson and also Tricia Malowney. So I guess open up the conversation for anyone that may have some questions for our guests.
Not so much. Most of what was said, I have, gathered the information purely. My son goes to Oakley Centre Industries, and he, of course, was very, very reluctant to have the vaccination. It's taken us all this while, plus also work by his therapist to try and convince him to have the vaccination. And I think one of the things that clinched it was the requirement that the staff, or not the staff, the employees need to be vaccinated. My question is, I really want to know what the situation is with regards to the employees. Do they need to be fully vaccinated before they are allowed back at work, or what the situation is? Christopher has had one inoculation, and thank you very much for opening up the administration offices for him to have it there. Because that was one of the reasons to what cinched us being able to convince him to have his first inoculation, which he had 2 weeks ago.
Thanks, Phil. I'm sure Therese would probably like to respond to that.
Thank you. Yes, we were lucky to be able to get some vaccine and provide it. We've done a number of on-site sessions, which has been really good, and it has certainly helped a lot of people have access to the vaccine. People who are in the disability services environment must have had their first vaccination by the 15th, which is next Friday, and they must provide us with proof. And then the second vaccination before the 26th of November. So if he's had it, he's fine. We just need to have proof, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, he's had his first one.
Well done.
Yeah, it was challenging, I can tell you.
Yes.
And he's having his second one on the 29th of October. That's when he slotted in.
So that will be fine as long as you give the proof to Athena.
Yeah.
We keep it on record very safely for people, but what that does is that's our evidence that he's had it. So that's great. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm booked in to have mine tomorrow. So
Good on you.
Yeah, I'm having my first dose because we had to get him over the hurdle first of all, so that he could see, that everything was okay, because he'd sort of meshed it in his mind that if we have the vaccination, we're both going to die. So we thought we'd get him over the first hurdle, and then when he could see that everything was travelling okay, I would then get in and have mine, which is why I'm booked in tomorrow.
Thank you. Very timely. I'll hand over to the experts, but to my mind, it's very good to have it as soon as you can.
I think it's Tricia, I think one of the things that's also worked is having their co-workers being vaccinated. And I know the team leaders at OCE have been really saying, I've had mine, I'm okay. Yeah. Because I think that really works as well.
The good thing about having it at the administration and having the staff there, that made a huge difference to convincing him to have it, because one of the supervisors was there. So yeah, there was that level, that trust that he was, happy. So yeah, that was a great way to overcome, the sheer reluctance on his part to have the vaccination.
That's great.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone want to add to that or have any more questions?
My other question, sorry, is any idea when the centre will be opening up for employees?
You're on mute.
I'm sick of people telling me I'm on mute. Oh, yes. So we've got space issues at the minute. We have space requirements that we have to follow, and as soon as we're allowed to, as soon as the government opens up, I suspect it might be November, but I can't say for sure yet. Right. Even though we've got the roadmap. The roadmap is always a little different for disability services. Yeah, we're always that little bit behind. So as soon as we can, we'll let you know. I promise.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Vula. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yes, I do.
Thanks, Salam.
Yes, hi. First of all, I would like to thank you for coming up with this platform to get education on the vaccine. I think it's really good. My question is, according to the presentation, there's been about 7 million doses of the AstraZeneca, and there's been 7 deaths. I would like to know what's the statistics in terms of Pfizer? Has there been any?
No deaths from Pfizer.
No deaths. Okay.
No.
All right. Thank you.
Good link from the TGA. I'll just find it now and I'll paste it in the chat for you, where they put weekly reports on safety on Pfizer and AstraZeneca and Moderna now, and I'll find that for you and I'll put it in the chat, because if you're interested in this area, you might find that particularly good.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Another good thing too that happens, which allayed our sort of fears as well, was not long after you have your vaccination, you get an SMS and an email, and I can't remember, it must be from one of the bodies that regarding the side effects. So the first one they send you is any side effects, I think from 1 to 3 days or something like that. And then they send a following email asking you to notate what side effects you've encountered from, I think, day 4 to 7. So that's really good, I found. So at least they are following up, with regard to what side effects that people who have been vaccinated are experiencing.
Sounds like you felt very supported.
Oh, absolutely. And as I said, that's important, especially, when you've got Christopher, and their the concerns.
Excellent.
I found the link I wanted. Sorry, the first one is still relevant. That's the ATAGI report. But This is probably one of the best ones to look at. There's a weekly report from the Therapeutic Goods Administration, and they provide up-to-date information, and that's the most recent report from the very end of September. You can have a look on there, and they're monitoring everything extremely carefully.
Thank you, Sarah. That's excellent. That's very helpful. Any other questions for our guests?
No.
No. Heather, are you right? You got any questions?
No, I'm fine. Thanks very much. It's been a very good presentation and I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was really informative.
Good. Tricia, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, don't forget that there are easy English versions of the information available, so to support people, to help them to understand why they need the vaccine, and to help you explain it to them, because, you know, when you've got an intellectual disability, all of these words are quite complicated words. So, you know, if you need anything like that, or if you need me to do anything, you know, I'm available for you.
Thanks, Tricia. And we've certainly tapped into those and trying to make whatever we can available on our website as well, in our resources area or our COVID area. So you can always call us as well. But yes, I agree, Sarah, that the Commonwealth Health Department website has also got some really good information as well. Well, last chance for any last questions, comments? Okay, well, thank you, Heather, Vula and Salom, for your participation today. It's really great to have you on board, but a special thanks to Tricia and to Dr. Sarah for your contribution. It's really interesting, and I think no matter how many times you sort of see things, it's not until you get into a conversation like this and you see that information displayed that you really fully grasp it and understand it, and it helps inform us even more. So I particularly want to thank you for all the work you're doing. You're both working very hard in this space, and it's just so critical for our sector that you're doing that. So thank you very much. Thanks to Therese for your input, and also Anne for helping set this up. Much appreciated. And everyone have a lovely night, and thank you very much again. I'm going to stop the recording as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you soon, hopefully.
Bye.
See you.